I'm very glad, happy, and proud to announce our first keynote speaker, Jeff Burton, who is, in the digital industry for about 40 years. And he's a co-founder of Electronic Arts, the first game publisher. And with that, he's kind of one of those guys that were parts of the very early days of the computer revolution, if that is a right way to say it. And the interesting, or one of the very interesting statements that I got when we met first at the occasion of a dinner in Berkeley was he said, well, for a longer time, I was not really involved in, the computer and gaming industry, but now with virtual reality, augmented reality, this is a whole new thing, and this is really like catching me. And since then, he's also, again, a VC investor. HolodeckVR is one of the things you do. If you just listen to him, the experiences and the different waypoints in his life, that's a talk in itself. So I'm very glad you're here. Thanks very much for joining. Please, Jeff, come up. Your stage. Please welcome Jeff Burton.
Good morning. Is this mic working? I guess, but I can speak loud enough for all the people that are here. I think anyway. I'm very pleased. Thank you, and Mark for inviting me because it's been a great 2 days so far, and today will be a great one too. I think. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the skyline of San Francisco, but it has changed in the last year or so dramatically with the addition of the Salesforce Tower. Changed the skyline, but it hasn't changed the city that much. It's still a vibrant place, and what I want to try to do is hit some highlights this morning of what the mindset in Silicon Valley is like, or at least my perspective on it, because I have been there. I started at Stanford when I was 18, so that's been 50 years I've lived in that area, and so 40 years of them have been in the high-tech industry. And I want to go kind of step back and maybe tell you some stuff that you haven't, that may not be aware of. Because there is, Silicon Valley people always ask me, how does it get started? And I actually, when I found out this stuff, I was kind of surprised too. There is a legacy, 100 or more years of innovation in Silicon Valley. Go back to 1887, the first mountaintop observatory in the world was in San Jose. That's the Lick Observatory. First vacuum tube was 1906. It was invented at Stanford. The first radio station in the U.S. was in San Jose. By 1917, Magnavox had invented the moving coil loudspeaker, and it's still in use. That's what we use for speakers still, is Magnavox's invention. They started out in Napa, but they quickly moved to San Mateo, which is just near the airport. That's a major innovation. The first television broadcast was in San Francisco, in the United States anyway. I don't know if there was one in Europe before 1927, but this is the Mount Sutro Tower in San Francisco. It still symbolizes the idea of broadcasting both radio and television. And that was 1927. So by a decade later, 1939, Hewlett-Packard created the first audio oscillator. I presume it oscillates audio. I don't know exactly what it does, but what was kind of interesting about that was that it caught the attention of Disney. So this high-tech company on the campus of the Stanford Industrial Park of Stanford, caught Disney's attention. They were one of the first consumer products companies to kind of take some advantage of the high technology that was being developed in the areas, and that was in 1939. Of course, the first atomic bomb, I give credit to UC Berkeley. For it's one at the same time saving the world and also giving us our means to destroy ourselves. But anyway, the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab really had a lot to do with that. In the 56, of course, William Shockley, who was a Nobel Prize winner for this, he founded his own transistor corporation. That's really what started, in a large way, the move into computers, and that was in Mountain View. So, again, it's on the peninsula, all part of the Bay Area. Let's back up too, because 160 years ago or 130 years ago, what is this? 150? Yeah, that's right. That's right. This is the 150th anniversary for the formation of UC Berkeley by the state of California. And its objective was to provide instruction and thorough and complete education in all departments. That's great. They've moved on. They also have provided parking spaces for their Nobel Prize winner professors. And it turns out that's more valuable than a Nobel Prize. If you've ever tried to find a parking place in Berkeley, you know that there aren't any. So to have your own on the campus of Berkeley, which is very small but has a beautiful view, that's great. But it's a huge university, and undoubtedly, UC Berkeley is the best public university in the world. It's just a fantastically creative place. That's in the East Bay. And then we have Stanford, which is on the peninsula, has an industrial park. It's really spread out. It has been there, it was 20 years after UC Berkeley was started, Stanford was established. And one of the distinctive things that I've found, because I don't know of any other university in the world that has this as an objective, it's to qualify its students for personal success and what? Direct usefulness in life. Okay, so that's an objective that has made a huge difference, I think, in the way people think. It's added to the mindset of people in Silicon Valley. And as I say, that there's no other university I know of in the world that has that as an objective and has followed through for the last 125 years with that as its main goal on all different levels. It's focused on the personal success of its students. And in a large way, I mean, these guys made a big difference. Frederick Terman was the dean of the engineering department at Stanford after World War II. He was also, well, he was part of it before World War II also, but he was both David Packard and Bill Hewlett were students of Frederick Terman, so they were influenced by him. And one of the things he did, which I'm not aware of any other university, anybody else in any university who's done this before or since, and that is he virtually made it a requirement for gaining tenure in the Department of Engineering at Stanford. It wasn't publish or perish, it was go start a company, and then you can come back and get tenure. So the faculty in the engineering department at Stanford all basically were required to take a leave and go start a company. Now, Terman helped them get funding from, at that time, the government, because there was a lot of funding going on. But that changed I think the trajectory of engineering students coming out of Stanford, because they had professors who had gone and started their own companies, or at least a lot of them had. And so it was kind of a revolving door into academia and then into business and back into academia. And here's another factor that I think made a big difference in the mindset of Silicon Valley, and that was Hewlett-Packard. I wish, or I would hope, that some of the big corporations around here would have this as a policy too. I was in my freshman year at Stanford, I had a freshman seminar, 8 students, with the top international executive at Hewlett-Packard. And we met at Hewlett-Packard's office, which was, as I say, on campus on the industrial park at Stanford. But one of the policies that I thought was really great then, this was in 1968, was that Hewlett-Packard, who had thousands of engineers employed by then, their policy was that if you wanted to go start a company, if you were an engineer at Hewlett-Packard and you had your own idea for starting a company, Hewlett-Packard encouraged you to leave and go start that company. They wouldn't invest in it, but here's what they did. They guaranteed you a job if you ever wanted to come back. And that was a big, big, I think, influence on how the mindset in Silicon Valley got started. It's risky enough to do a startup anyway, but it's really nice to have the safety net of some company like Hewlett-Packard that says, if you leave, that's okay, you're always guaranteed a job here. I think that's a great way to get people to go out and pursue their dreams. And actually, it's still, I don't think it's the policy. A few months ago, I was talking with some executives at Google, and I said, how do you attract enough engineers? I mean, that's a big problem because there's Facebook and Apple and all these other companies in the Bay Area, and everybody's looking for the engineers. And these executives said, well, you might be surprised, but as a matter of fact, half of the people right now that we employ are former Google employees. So whether it's a policy or not, that's what ends up happening. Is that the people leave, they find a startup, they join Google, then they see a startup they think they want to join, they go do that, and maybe it's successful, maybe not, but then they can always come back to Google because Google's willing to hire people that they've, once you've gotten into Google, they'll hire you again. And so that happens in Silicon Valley all the time with lots of companies. And I think that it should happen in Europe as well. I don't know that that's a policy, but I do think it would be a huge advantage if companies, large corporations, would provide that kind of attitude to their employees. It's not disloyal to leave. It's a creative advantage to have people that go out and do their own thing, and then you want them to come back because they're even better trained then, have more experience, and benefit your company even more than you could have had them benefit it by making them stay there. So here's my list of what I think the values are in Silicon Valley. Creativity, teamwork, fearlessness, sharing ideas, sharing the wealth, owning your own future and giving back. Okay, that set of values I don't think I've found in any other part of the world, certainly not in such intensity, with such intensity for each one of them. I think that they sort of epitomize what it takes in Silicon Valley to fit and to be part of it. I will say that there is a program that you probably haven't heard of, but it's been in existence for 20 years in Munich. It's called the Center for Digital Technology Management, and it's a joint venture master's honors program between TUM and LMU. They have about 600 applicants every year. They accept 40. And in that program, it's all taught in English, and it's their entrepreneurs. It's a master's degree, honors master's degree in entrepreneurship. You have to be simultaneously in another master's degree program at either TUM or LMU. And that group of 40 students they really have adopted these sets of values. The only place I've seen in the world, it's the best master's program I've seen in the world, academic program to create the mindset for entrepreneurship like they do. They've some fantastic companies have been born from the associations among the associations of those students that have gone through CDTM, and it's been going for 20 years, and hardly anybody in Germany's heard about it. It's incredible to me, but it is a great, great program. Let's talk a little bit about EA, because people always ask me, how did it get started, and what was it like? I'll just hit some highlights here. We had 5 people all of us were from Stanford Business School, except one who had a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Stanford. We were from Harvard, UC Berkeley, Yale, and Stanford as undergrads. None of us knew how to program anything. We were all executives. I was the only one. I had worked at Atari before we started Electronic Arts. The only one had been in the video game industry. None of the others had been. But we were all executives at these companies, and mostly in marketing. So Electronic Arts was a publishing firm, and so our job was to try to promote the products of independent authors. And the goal that we had was to infuse computers with something like an emotional engagement for the general public. And this was our first print ad. This group of people is not, we're not in there. Those are the independent artists or programmers that created our first set of products. And the title of this ad, Can a Computer Make You Cry? This is 1983, just as the home computer business was starting to look like it might become something. That is really embodies what it is we wanted to try to do. And of course, we wanted to promote the artists that were creating the content. And we hired a LA photographer to come pose them and stuff. And for many years, our packaging had liner notes. We'd put a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk in a little 8 by 8 cardboard box or flat package that had liner notes. In like record albums, we had interviews with the artists about how they were, why they wrote what they did, what they wanted to get out of it, how they thought about it. So we wanted these artists to be able to create a personality for themselves that would inspire people. Eventually we were able to reach those goals. Let me show you another couple of clips here, videos, interviews with a couple of people from the company. One of them was with an artist, but it's never been released publicly. We only used it internally.
In order for us to do what we are trying to do, we have to be obsessed, and we have to be a little bit arrogant, and we have to be a little bit cocky about having a sense of possibilities that are open to us that aren't open to others because of our convictions. And if we didn't feel that way, if we didn't even have a little bit of a sense of not knowing what we don't know, and if we were too conscious of the pitfalls, if we were too conscious of the obstacles, we might lose our conviction. And we really do have the sense of really being obsessed with it and really believing that we know how to do it better than everybody else. And that may seem arrogant, but if we didn't feel that way, we wouldn't be able to pull it off. And it's because we feel that way that we're going to.
Okay, so I show this because it is the perfect example, I think, still. That was 1983, and that was our CEO, Trip Hawkins, one of our co-founders. And he expresses what we all felt at that time as co-founders or as founders of this startup. And in 2012, I was invited to be the first executive director at UC Berkeley's startup accelerator that they established called SkyDeck. And I can tell you, this is the same attitude that the great founders we had at UC Berkeley. That's the same attitude they had, 30, 40 years, well, 35, 36 years later. And so that is just that shows you the kind of thinking that's required. And I'd say that the people from CDTM that I know, the young people that I've known there for the last 5, 6 years, they have that same attitude. That's the attitude of a startup founder. Now here's one of our artists.
It's possible for a computer to provide a world where the rules are open-ended, where if you're flying around a planet and you decide to take off toward that star, you can. I'd like to write some software that interacts with you in a way that's really closer to the way a person would interact with you. That's why I've been mentioning the idea of a software friend, and that sort of should be built into a computer, but it can be built into a program too.
Software friend, 1983. Nobody was talking about that kind of stuff, at least not publicly, and this was private too. But still, that was what we wanted to do. Was to, if we'd had the tools and the hardware capabilities, we would have produced a FIFA football back in '83. But it took about 15 years for that to actually all come together. So, but that was our dream. That was what we were thinking about back then. And I see now the virtual reality industry is sort of having the same kind of hard time getting going. It reminds me very much of what we were doing back in '83 with the home computer industry. And of course, the company still exists. It just finished its fiscal year with $5 billion in revenues. It's very profitable, has no debt, and its market value is, as of June 15th, I looked that up, was $45 billion. So it's a big, successful company. We made it feel like we created a culture there that has withstood 40 years, back 38 years. We also have created how many millionaires? Well, I don't know, but it's hundreds. And each one of those that has become a millionaire as a result of Electronic Arts, everybody has also invested in other startups in the Bay Area. That's the ethic. It's an unwritten rule, but it's not a rule. It's just a practice that everybody who makes money on startups, they turn around and they invest in other companies that are starting up in order to try to help them also make it. So today, with AI, let's call it XR, AR, VR, MR, whatever you want to call it, it's the intensity level of the engagement has just risen tremendously. And as I said, if we'd had virtual reality when we started in '83, that's what we would have gone to for sure. But I think we got to a point of 2D pretty much engagement, but that has its limitations. And this opens up a whole new dimension. Let me show you this little clip about HolodeckVR. It's a Munich company spin out from Fraunhofer in Germany. It's called location-based entertainment. That's Fraunhofer's lab area, test area. So here's a homage to Pac-Man, where you were Pac-Man. And you have to run down the virtual reality hallways of the Pac-Man maze chasing these gold nuggets. It's a lot of fun, and yet you were completely immersed in it. And you can see it, they're running around in wide open spaces. So there's an homage to Pong, where you're the paddle. You have to run back and forth. You can see your partner on the other side of the field or stadium. And here's an exploration just walking. So you're walking through nothing, but that's what you see, and the first person is up in the corner. And people are mesmerized by it. So that's the kind of, when I saw that first, the first thing I saw with HolodeckVR was the Pac-Man knockoff, if you will. And it was so much fun. I was running back and forth through the maze, and people said to me afterwards, younger people said, "Did you go through the walls? Did you run through the walls?" And I said, "No, it never occurred to me. As far as I was concerned, they were walls." That's what's so powerful about virtual reality. And of course, free roaming headsets, and they'll get better. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen to make this a much more interesting for the general public, but it's going there. I'm convinced of that. Here's a problem that has arisen just recently, and I was not aware of this so much until the last few months even. And of course, we have an issue in the United States that amplifies the problem, and it's called Trump. But anyway, our eyes and brains can be fooled, and we also, if we hear the same lies over and over again, people start to believe them too. But just here's an example: deep fakes. I wasn't even aware that this was going on until a few months ago.
45th President of the United States. Hooray, we did it! And today, many of you are scared and marching in the streets. You are worried that your country is in the hands of these unpredictable.
So, talk about fake news. Now there's the capability to have people say things that they don't say, but it look like they're saying it with video. Video special effects. And then there's, this guy who would be king. Somebody on the internet felt like he makes a great queen. But it's hard to tell. You have to really know that that's not him. That isn't he. And this is I. I mean, I can't dance like that. That's my avatar. It's a three-dimensional image of me that the company that I'm on the board of does three-dimensional. They started as a 3D printing company, but anyway, they made me do that dance. Well, I don't know. As things get more sophisticated, that's. I'm just throwing this out there. That's a problem I don't know how to solve. How are we going to cope with this? Right now, we have this president that repeats lies all the time, and some people don't know how to distinguish between between truth and lies. Well, it's getting to the point where with video and it's getting to the point where we will end up not being able to distinguish. So my suggestion is a personal ID verification on the blockchain. It won't keep the deep fakes from occurring, but it will allow all of us to own our own image, and only it will be validated with a seal or something that indicates that's the real person in a video or whatever. And I think that we're going to have to go to something like that, because with AI coming in and affecting video and all that stuff, I think that's an issue that we're going to have to face. And I don't know how to solve it right now, but I think it's going to be one that we will face. So after all these years, I have come up with some things, personal advice to entrepreneurs. And the first one is that when you start a company, you should select only the people that you believe are the smartest, most talented people that you know. The people are what make a company succeed, absolutely, unequivocally. Second, you need to try to make the biggest impact you can possibly imagine, change the world, and that's something that Europeans have not fully adopted yet. So I want everybody to think big. Also, you need to be honest and true to yourself, even when it doesn't give you the advantage, and that's hard to do throughout a lifetime, but especially in a startup too. The fourth is that people don't say this very often, but loads of money, and I can say this personally, doesn't deliver happiness or contentment necessarily. You need to do what you're passionate about. Forget about the money. And finally, you've got to give back. You're the most privileged and fortunate person in the world to have the experience of being an entrepreneur. So you got to share it. Now, people have often asked me, Jeff, isn't it kind of too late to start? There's too many startup companies. And as far as I'm concerned, my answer is no. This is the best time in my lifetime to start a company. And I think the epitome, or the epitome of what the mentality in Silicon Valley is, you got to wear shades. Bright future. Thank you.
Very much. Awesome.
My prop.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.